When I saw my daughter-in-law standing at the church altar, radiant in her white dress, something in me fractured. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I thought I was coming to celebrate my son's marriage, but what I saw was something I could never have imagined, something I'd buried for 20 years. It started with the invitation. The envelope was plain, almost understated, but the handwriting was familiar. My son had sent it, or so I thought. The words inside were warm, and polite in that way that hid secrets. I would love for you to be there, Mom. It wouldn't be the same without you. I should have questioned it. My son had never been one to write letters like this. But I didn't. I told myself it was just his way of being thoughtful. I didn't know that opening that envelope would unravel a lifetime of things I thought I'd buried. The days leading up to the wedding were filled with a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. I found myself cleaning the house obsessively, even though I had already spent the morning dusting every corner. The smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air, sharp, but somehow comforting. I baked cookies, something I hadn't done in ages. Chocolate chip, the kind my daughter used to love when she was little. I kept thinking about the past, about the little girl who had been taken from me, the one I'd lost to circumstances I could never undo. Her face, her laugh, the way she used to twirl in the kitchen as I cooked, they all came back in fragments. And now, standing here, I was expected to smile and clap as she, my estranged daughter, married my son. But I didn't know it yet, not fully. All I knew was a strange pull, a feeling of familiarity that I couldn't place. My life had been quiet for years, almost painfully so. My husband David was steady and kind, though a little distant at times. He worked long hours, and I often found myself alone in the house, tending to the garden, or sitting by the window with a cup of tea. My son, Michael, was grown now, with a life of his own. I'd watched him grow from a curious, mischievous boy into a man who had always tried to please me, though sometimes clumsily. I lived in a small, cozy home on the edge of town. The floors creaked just enough to remind me that the house was alive, breathing with memories. The scent of jasmine from the garden wafted in through the kitchen window in the mornings. These small details grounded me, kept me tethered to the world as I navigated the quiet grief of years past. I had a life that was ordinary, predictable, safe, until the day the invitation arrived. The first clue came subtly, almost innocently. I was at the florist, picking up a bouquet for the wedding, when I saw her reflection in the glass doors. Her hair was long, dark, and shiny, falling in waves over her shoulders. Her eyes, those eyes! I froze in place. They weren't my daughter's exact eyes, but something about the way they held the light, the shape, the depth. It was uncanny. I shook it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe she just reminded me of someone I once knew. Maybe it was the way the light hit her face, the gentle curve of her smile. I left the shop with the flowers, my hands gripping the stems too tightly, my mind buzzing with unease. Over the next few days, the feeling grew. I saw her around town, at the grocery store, walking past the park where I used to take my daughter for ice cream. She moved with a familiarity that made my chest ache, like a memory wrapped in flesh and bone. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the seed of doubt had been planted. At home, I found myself replaying old photographs, the ones tucked away in dusty albums. Pictures of a little girl with wide, curious eyes and a mischievous grin. I traced her face with my finger, whispering her name under my breath. The resemblance, I realized with a shock I tried to suppress, was undeniable. It couldn't be her, I told myself. Could it? The day of the rehearsal arrived, and I could barely eat breakfast. The aroma of scrambled eggs and toast filled the kitchen, but I had no appetite. David noticed my silence, his brow furrowing as he poured coffee into our favorite mugs. "You okay, honey?" he asked, his voice low, almost cautious. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just nervous," I said, though my stomach churned with something else entirely. Something I couldn't name. When we arrived at the church, I kept my eyes on the floor, avoiding the sight of her as she moved among the wedding party. But it was impossible. Every gesture, every laugh, every glance carried a weight of recognition that pressed down on me. My heart beat faster, my palms slick with sweat. It wasn't until I heard her speak, her voice soft, melodic, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten, that I knew it was her, my daughter, my little girl grown into a woman I barely recognized. I excused myself from the rehearsal dinner and stepped outside into the cool night air. The scent of damp earth and blooming roses filled my senses, grounding me just enough to think. My hands trembled as I held the letter she had sent, the invitation folded neatly in my purse. I unfolded it again, reading the words as if they held a secret I had overlooked. "I would love for you to be there, Mom. It wouldn't be the same without you." I clutched the paper to my chest, feeling the weight of years, of missed moments, of stolen time. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. She had known who I was all along. She had reached out, inviting me to witness her wedding while I remained oblivious. Tears blurred my vision, and I sank to the bench beneath the magnolia tree, the petals falling around me like tiny reminders of lost innocence. I didn't know how to confront her. I didn't know if I should. All I knew was that my life had shifted in an instant, and there was no going back. The next morning, I tried to resume normal life, but the air felt heavy, thick with unspoken truths. I watched Michael as he fussed with his tie, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. David noticed my distraction and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, a silent question in his eyes. "I'll be fine," I whispered, though I wasn't. I could feel the past clawing its way to the surface, demanding recognition, demanding answers. When the bride arrived at the house to pick up her bouquet for the rehearsal, I finally saw her close enough to feel the truth in my bones. The resemblance was undeniable. The curve of her chin, the set of her eyes, the way she smiled with a mix of confidence and hesitation. It was her. My daughter. I couldn't breathe. I tried to speak, but my voice faltered. She looked at me, her own expression unreadable. For a long moment, we stood there, the room silent except for the ticking clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. It felt like years had passed in that silence, decades of absence compressed into a single heartbeat. Finally, she spoke. "Mom?" Her voice trembled, soft and unsure, as if she feared my reaction. I opened my mouth, closed it again, unsure of how to begin. The years of separation, the pain, the lost moments, all of it collided in an instant. I didn't know, I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know it was you. Her eyes filled with tears, and in that moment, the distance of years seemed to collapse. Her lips trembled and she swallowed hard. "I wanted you to know," she said quietly, "but I didn't know how. I've been afraid." Afraid. The word echoed in my mind. All these years, she had been out there somewhere, living her life, carrying the same fear and uncertainty I'd carried every single day. And yet, she had reached out, invited me to her wedding. My chest tightened with a mixture of grief, love, and disbelief. We sat together on the edge of the living room sofa, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of us. I traced the outline of her hand with my fingers, as if touching her could bridge the decades of absence. "Tell me everything," I whispered. "I need to understand." She took a deep breath and began her story. She had been adopted by a family across the state, moved far away when she was just a toddler. She didn't remember much about those first years with me, only flashes, my voice calling her name, the smell of cookies baking, the warmth of my embrace. But she remembered enough to carry a sense of loss, a longing for the mother she'd barely known. Her father, her real father, was my first love, a man I had thought I'd left behind forever. Life had separated us in ways I hadn't imagined, and the consequences had rippled forward, shaping the lives of everyone involved. And now, decades later, here we were, meeting not just as mother and daughter, but in the context of a wedding that bound her to my son. I could feel my stomach twist. The realization that my son was marrying my estranged daughter made my head spin. How had I not seen it? How had fate, or misfortune, brought us to this impossible point? I didn't know she was your daughter," Michael said gently, stepping into the room. His voice was calm, but I saw the flicker of confusion and hurt in his eyes. "I didn't either," I admitted, my voice trembling. "Not until now." David placed his hand over mine, steadying me. He said, "We'll figure this out," he said softly. "Together." The next few days were a blur of preparation, internal conflict, and stolen moments of reflection. I walked through the house, touching objects that carried memories of the past. The chipped teacup I had once shared with my little girl, the rocking chair where I had sung lullabies. The scent of vanilla and old wood mixed in the air, grounding me, reminding me that life moves forward, even when hearts are tangled in knots. I tried to interact with her normally, to be the supportive mother-in-law my son expected me to be, but every glance, every smile carried the undercurrent of recognition. The way she paused before speaking, the subtle tilt of her head, the familiar inflection in her laughter, it all pointed to a truth that was almost unbearable. At night, I would lie awake in the quiet house, listening to the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of traffic. I thought about forgiveness, about reconciliation, about how to navigate the impossible position we had all been thrust into. My mind wandered back to the little girl I had lost, and I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. Then came the day of the bridal shower. The house buzzed with excitement, laughter spilling from the kitchen as women sipped tea and nibbled pastries. I stood quietly in a corner, observing her. She moved among the guests with ease, accepting compliments with grace, her smile radiant. And yet, when our eyes met across the room, the familiarity was undeniable. At one point, she approached me, her bouquet of roses in hand. She handed me a single bloom, her fingers brushing mine. The scent of the flower was faint, but intoxicating, and I felt my chest tighten again. "I wanted you to have this," she said softly. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The room faded around me, leaving just the two of us suspended in a fragile moment of recognition and unspoken emotion. I wanted to reach out, to pull her into my arms, to undo all the years of separation, but I hesitated. The world demanded that we play our roles, that we navigate the wedding as if nothing had changed. The first real confrontation came when I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I found her alone in the garden, the evening sun casting long shadows across the lawn. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming jasmine, and I could hear the distant laughter of children playing nearby. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice low, almost tentative. Why did you invite me? Did you know who I was? Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded. Yes, she admitted. I knew. I wanted to see you. I wanted, I don't know, some kind of closure before I moved forward with my life. I felt my heart ache. Here she was, the daughter I had lost, carrying the same longing I had felt all these years. And now she was marrying my son, and our lives were forever intertwined. I don't know how to navigate this, I whispered. I want to be happy for you, but I feel lost, confused, angry. She took my hand, holding it tightly. I understand, she said, but maybe we can figure it out. Together. The tension simmered over the next week, growing as the wedding approached. I found myself oscillating between joy for my daughter and unease about the impossible family dynamic. Every glance at Michael reminded me of the complex web of relationships we were navigating. Every smile from her carried a mixture of familiarity and estrangement. I began keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts and emotions, the things I couldn't say aloud. I wrote about my guilt, my longing, my fear. I wrote about the moments I had missed, the milestones I had never witnessed, the lullabies left unsung. And through the act of writing, I began to process the storm inside me, to find a path toward understanding and reconciliation. On the eve of the wedding, I found myself standing in the garden again, alone. The sky was painted in hues of pink and gold, the air warm with the scent of blooming roses. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. The laughter, the tears, the moments both lost and found. I realized that life had placed us here not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to reclaim what had been lost, to forgive, to love, and to move forward. When she approached me, dressed in her bridal gown for the final fitting, I felt my chest tighten. The resemblance to the little girl I had lost was undeniable, but she was fully grown now, a woman in her own right. She said, "I hope you can forgive me," softly, her voice trembling. "I hope we can start again." I reached out, pulling her into my arms. The warmth of her embrace filled me with a bittersweet ache. "I forgive you," I whispered. "I've missed you all these years, but maybe we can find each other again." The morning of the wedding arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The sun poured through the windows, warm and golden, lighting up the house and our hearts alike. I found myself standing in the kitchen, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling in the cool morning air, and trying to steady my thoughts. Today was the day. Everything would be revealed, not just to family and friends, but to the world outside. David came in quietly, brushing his hand over my shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. His eyes were calm, steadying me in a way only he could. "I think I am," though my voice wavered. I had spent the night replaying every possible scenario in my mind. How would Michael react when he knew? How would my daughter feel seeing me in her life again under such complicated circumstances? And most importantly, how would I navigate the delicate dance of supporting their marriage while reconciling the past? We arrived at the church just as guests were beginning to trickle in. The air was fragrant with lilies and roses, a soft breeze rustling through the trees outside. I caught sight of her, my daughter, adjusting the hem of her gown, her face glowing with both excitement and nerves. For a moment, I just watched her, letting the years of longing and sorrow wash over me. Michael approached, his tie slightly askew, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on mine. There was a question in his gaze, one I could feel pressing against me without words. I nodded gently, signaling that everything was okay, or at least as okay as it could be in this strange, tangled situation. The ceremony began, and the world seemed to hold its breath. My daughter and Michael stood at the altar, hands intertwined, eyes locked in a gaze filled with love and anticipation. I felt a strange mix of emotions: pride, joy, and an undercurrent of grief for the years lost. Each word of the vows cut through me like both a balm and a blade. I smiled through the tightness in my chest, trying to focus on the happiness before me, while acknowledging the complexity of our reality. When it was time for her to walk down the aisle, I was closer than I thought I could bear. I saw her clearly now: the delicate curve of her jaw, the familiar tilt of her head, the way her eyes sparkled when they found mine. My chest ached with recognition, a deep, aching pulse that I hadn't felt in decades. After the ceremony, the reception was a whirlwind of congratulations, laughter, and delicate conversations. I found myself in pockets of quiet moments with her, sitting beneath a canopy of lights and sipping champagne. I watched her laugh with old friends, the way her shoulders relaxed and her eyes shone, and I was reminded of the little girl who had once twirled around the kitchen in my house, barefoot and carefree. At one point, she leaned toward me, her voice barely audible over the music. "Mom," she said, her hand brushing against mine, "I know this isn't easy, and I know it's strange, but thank you for coming, for being here." I squeezed her hand, a wave of warmth coursing through me. "I'm here," I said simply. "That's all that matters. I'm here, now." The first real confrontation with reality came that evening, after the guests had gone home. Michael pulled me aside, his expression serious. "Mom," he began, "there's something we need to talk about. I know you know about her." I nodded slowly, bracing myself. "I do," I admitted, "and I've known since the rehearsal. It's a lot to process." Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely concerned. I want everyone to be okay. I want you to be okay with this. And I know it's complicated, but I need you to know that I love her, and I want our family to survive this." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. "I love you, Michael," I said, "and I want that too. But we have a lot to navigate, a lot of healing to do." Over the next few weeks, we began the delicate work of rebuilding relationships. I met with her privately, spending hours talking about the past, the choices that had been made, the fears that had kept us apart. She told me about the years she had spent wondering about me, about the nights she had cried herself to sleep wishing she could find her mother. I shared my own regrets, my own sorrow, my own longing for the daughter I had lost. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, tears, and moments of anger. There were nights when I questioned whether we could ever bridge the gap of 2 decades. But slowly, painstakingly, we began to find common ground. One afternoon, we decided to visit the old neighborhood where I had raised her. The house had changed. The paint faded, the garden overgrown, but the memories lingered in every corner. We walked through the rooms, touching the walls, recalling the little girl who had once lived there. "Do you remember this?" I asked, pointing to the scratch on the doorframe where her height had been marked. She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything." We sat together on the front steps, the sun warm on our faces, and I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't perfect, nothing about our situation was, but it was a start, a step toward forgiveness, toward understanding, toward family. Then came the difficult conversations with extended family. Some were supportive, others skeptical, and a few outright hostile. I learned that reconciliation isn't just about the people directly involved, it's about navigating the perceptions, judgments, and emotions of everyone around us. I held my ground, speaking calmly and honestly, explaining the circumstances, acknowledging mistakes, and advocating for compassion. Slowly, hearts softened. People began to see the humanity in our story, the resilience, the love that had persisted despite time and separation. Through all of this, my husband David remained a steady presence. He never judged, never pressured, simply offered support. His quiet strength was a reminder that love isn't always loud. It's the soft hand on your shoulder, the calm voice in the storm, the unwavering presence when life feels impossible. Evenings became our time for reflection. I would sit with her in the kitchen, drinking tea, sharing memories, and planning for the future. We cooked together, laughed over burnt cookies, and reminisced about the small joys of childhood. It was in these moments, in the quiet domesticity, that we rebuilt our bond. The past was still there, a shadow, but it no longer defined us. One night, as we watched the stars from the porch, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "I never thought I'd have a mother like you again," she said softly. I hugged her tightly. "And I never thought I'd have a daughter back," I replied. "But here we are, and we'll make the most of it." Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary, but ordinary in a way that was rich, layered, and tender. The wedding was over, the photos framed, the celebrations tucked away into memory. Yet, the impact of that day lingered like the faint scent of roses after a summer rain. I found myself paying attention to the small things again. The way she laughed when she told a story about her childhood, the subtle nervous gesture she made when trying something new, the way she flinched when I raised my voice in surprise, just a little, as I sometimes did when I got frustrated. Every little detail reminded me that she was real and human, and mine. It wasn't all peaceful. The shadow of the past still stretched long across our interactions. There were moments when I would see her glance at Michael in a way that made my chest tighten. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying every decision, wondering if the path we were taking could truly lead to reconciliation. The first real test came unexpectedly. Michael and I were in the kitchen one morning preparing breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast with melted butter, and a cup of strong coffee. The smell of cinnamon from the pastry she had baked the day before still lingered in the air, comforting and bittersweet. "I don't know how to act around her sometimes," Michael admitted quietly, flipping the eggs in the pan. "I want to be happy for you both, but it's complicated. I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope." I nodded, understanding completely. "I know," I said, stirring the coffee absent-mindedly. "It's not simple, Michael. But love isn't simple, and neither is family." He looked at me, searching for reassurance. "Do you think she'll forgive me someday for everything that's happened?" I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Forgiveness isn't about blame, Michael. It's about understanding, and I believe she'll get there, just like we are." That afternoon, I had a conversation with her that would shape the course of our rebuilding relationship. We were in the garden, sitting on the old wooden bench beneath the magnolia tree, the leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I've been thinking about the years we lost, about the things we never shared, about how I should have tried harder to find you." Her eyes brimmed with tears, glinting in the sunlight. "Mom, I spent so many nights wondering why you weren't there. I blamed myself sometimes, thinking maybe I wasn't enough for you to want me. But now I know it wasn't that. It was just life. Life took us in different directions. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past pressing down, yet strangely comforting. It was proof that the wounds existed, but also that they could be acknowledged, confronted, and healed. Then came the moment I had dreaded and secretly anticipated, the family gathering where everyone would meet again knowing the truth. Our relatives were kind, but curious, asking questions that made my stomach knot. Some glanced at her with suspicion, others with sympathy. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, judging, trying to understand the impossible. She remained composed, elegant in her calm demeanor, but I could see the tension in her hands, the slight tightening of her jaw, the small inhale before speaking. When it was our turn to speak, we did so together. "We've spent years apart," I began, my voice steady, "but we're here now, and that's what matters. We want to rebuild what was lost, to create a family that loves and supports each other, despite the past." She reached for my hand, smiling faintly. "It won't be perfect," she added, "but it will be ours." The room relaxed, just slightly. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a start. A tentative step towards something real, something grounded in love rather than fear. Evenings became our sanctuary. After the chaos of the day, we would sit together, sharing stories, laughing over small mishaps, and cooking meals that filled the house with warmth. I discovered new things about her favorite foods, her love of old jazz records, the way she always stirred her tea clockwise. I shared my own routines, my own quirks, the little rituals that had kept me steady over the years. One night, as we baked cookies, the scent of chocolate and vanilla filling the kitchen, she laughed at my tendency to oversalt the dough. "You always did that," she said, grinning. "I remember as a little girl, you'd scold me for not stirring long enough, but you'd ruin the sugar." I laughed too, the sound raw and warm. "I suppose some things never change," I said. And in that moment, it felt like we were bridging the gap of 20 years with nothing but flour, sugar, and laughter. But life has a way of testing even the most delicate reconciliations. A letter arrived from her adoptive parents, expressing concern over our newfound closeness, suggesting that perhaps we were rushing into things, that some wounds ran too deep to heal so quickly. I read the letter aloud to her hand in mine, both of us absorbing the words and the intentions behind them. "They just want to protect me," she said quietly, squeezing my hand. "I know, and I want that too. But protection isn't about keeping distance. It's about allowing love and trust to grow, even when it's uncomfortable." We decided together to write back, assuring them that our reconnection was thoughtful, deliberate, and guided by care. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, I realized, was the foundation of the life we were trying to rebuild. The real turning point came unexpectedly one afternoon. We were organizing old photo albums in the attic, dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that streamed through the small window. She found a picture of us together, a faded, torn photograph of a little girl with pigtails, laughing as I held her hand. "I can't believe this is us," she whispered, tracing my face with her finger. "I've missed this," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "I've missed you. Every day. For 20 years. We hugged then, a long, unbroken embrace that spoke more than words ever could. In that moment, I realized that the hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It was living with the absence of it. And now, Finally, we could begin to fill in the missing years with memories of our own making. Even Michael noticed the change. One evening, he joined us on the porch, leaning on the railing as we sipped iced tea. "I see it," he said simply. "The two of you, it's real. The bond. It's not forced. It's natural." I nodded, smiling softly. "It's a start, and that's enough for now." He chuckled, a low, relieved sound. "I guess some surprises are worth everything." The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, our lives began to intertwine in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. I found myself cooking dinner with her, the aromas of garlic and rosemary filling the kitchen as we laughed over forgotten recipes. We shared errands, quiet walks, and long conversations that stretched late into the evening, each one building the fragile but growing bridge between us. Even Michael seemed to relax into the new family dynamic. There were still moments of tension, small reminders that our lives were far from simple, but the laughter at the dinner table and the shared stories in the living room reminded us all that love could survive, even thrive, after betrayal and absence. One morning, I woke early to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. I wandered downstairs in my robe, still rubbing the sleep from my eyes, and found her sitting at the table with a journal open before her. The sunlight caught her hair, making it glow like spun gold. And for a moment, I was transported back to the little girl who had run barefoot through the garden. "Good morning," I said softly. She looked up and smiled. "Morning, Mom. I've been writing. About us. About everything. Trying to make sense of it all." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "It's been a lot," I said, "but I'm proud of you. Proud of the way you've handled everything." She blushed faintly. "I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if you'd accept me, or if I even deserved to be accepted." I reached across the table and took her hand. I said, "You've always deserved it. And now we get the chance to show each other just how much we've missed." As the days grew warmer, we started involving her more with family traditions, the small rituals that had sustained me through years of quiet living. We baked pies together for holidays, decorated the house with lights, and even attempted to teach her my secret recipe for the cinnamon rolls that had once been her favorite. One afternoon, we were in the garden, planting flowers along the walkway, our hands muddy, laughing as we tried to avoid the bees that had made their home in the old rose bushes. She paused and looked at me, eyes bright. "Mom, I never thought I'd have this again," she said softly. "I never thought I'd feel normal, happy, safe." I smiled, feeling the weight of years lift slightly from my shoulders. "Neither did I admitted. But life gives us second chances, even when we least expect them." Then came a letter from her adoptive parents, this time less cautious and more encouraging. They had seen the changes, the genuine effort to rebuild a bond, and they wrote of their hope that we could continue healing together. Reading their words, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about us, it was about the wider family, the acceptance of the world around us. I showed the letter to her, and we read it together, laughing quietly at the formality of the prose and the care behind it. "They care," she said, her voice soft. "They've always cared, even when it was hard to see. And we care," I added. "That's what matters now." One evening, David came home early from work. The smell of his cologne mixed with the aroma of the dinner we had prepared, and he leaned against the doorway, watching us set the table. "You two look happy," he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. We exchanged a glance, and in that moment, I realized just how far we had come. The ache of lost years hadn't disappeared. It would never fully disappear, but it had softened, transformed into a tender understanding that could now hold love as well as memory. Yes, I said, pouring wine into the glasses. We're finding our way. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still reminders of the past that caused friction, misunderstandings, small arguments, and the occasional spike of fear that old wounds might reopen. But we faced them together, discussing openly, never letting resentment fester. One particularly tense evening, a disagreement arose over a family decision. Voices were raised briefly, frustration evident in every word. But then she stepped forward, calm but firm, and said, "We can handle this, together, as a family." Her words carried a weight that reminded me of the strength I had seen in her as a child, the same resilience I had hoped she had carried with her all these years. I nodded, feeling the tension melt. "You're right," I admitted. Together. Over time, the relationships with extended family began to stabilize. Some relatives who had initially been wary began to see the truth of our bond, the sincerity in our efforts to heal. Invitations to gatherings became more frequent, and with each shared meal or celebration, the awkwardness faded. It was during one of these gatherings that I realized how much we had truly healed. We were laughing, sharing stories, the scent of roasted turkey and fresh bread filling the house. She leaned against me as we watched Michael tell a story about his childhood, and I felt a profound sense of peace. We were family. Not perfect, not free from past pain, but alive with connection, love, and understanding. The defining moment came one quiet afternoon when she and I were sitting in the garden, the golden light of late afternoon bathing everything in warmth. I handed her a photo album, one we had spent months restoring, filled with pictures of both her childhood and our recent time together. "Look at this," I said softly, opening to a photo of her as a little girl, holding my hand in the garden, just like we were now. Tears filled her eyes. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "It feels like I've been given back a part of my life I thought I'd lost forever." I hugged her tightly, the weight of all those years of separation, sorrow, and longing melting into a tender, shared understanding. "And I've been given you back," I said. That's all I could ever want. The following weeks brought an unexpected sense of normalcy. Life had a rhythm again, one that felt grounded yet new, a delicate balance between past wounds and present healing. Michael was patient, David remained steadfast, and I found myself laughing more often, a warmth spreading through my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Yet, beneath it all, a tension lingered, a sense that the revelation of the wedding and the truth of her identity had consequences far beyond our immediate circle. The world outside our little home wasn't always ready for complexities like ours, and sometimes even the kindest words carried judgment. The first public ripple came at a community gathering. I hadn't expected the mix of curiosity, suspicion, and quiet admiration from our neighbors. Some whispered behind polite smiles. Others approached us directly, seeking clarification or simply to express support. I realized that our story, now partially visible to the world, had taken on a life of its own. She and I decided early on to be honest, yet measured. We didn't need to overshare. We only needed to assert that our bond was genuine, that the past was acknowledged, and that forgiveness and reconciliation were at the core of our actions. One afternoon, while walking through the local park, a neighbor approached me. "I heard about the wedding," she said softly. I just wanted to say it takes courage to face something like that, to rebuild family after so long." I smiled, a faint blush warming my cheeks. "It hasn't been easy," I admitted, "but it's worth it." The neighbor nodded, then looked at my daughter, with a quiet curiosity. "And you?" she asked. "How do you feel?" Her eyes met mine, and I saw the mixture of fear and hope I remembered from that first day she had confessed the truth. She took a breath. "It's strange," she said, "but I feel free. Finally, I feel like I belong somewhere." Public acknowledgement of our story was daunting, but it also became an opportunity for growth. We were invited to family gatherings, local events, even casual visits from neighbors who had been distant or unsure. Each interaction became a small test of our resilience and commitment to honesty and love. At one such gathering, my brother-in-law approached me. "I didn't know how to react at first," he admitted. "But seeing you both together now, I can see the bond is real. I'm happy for you." I nodded, appreciating the acknowledgement. "It's been a journey, but we're learning every day how to be a family again." The first truly challenging moment came unexpectedly. A distant relative, unaware of our reconciliation, voiced disapproval at a family dinner. Their tone was sharp, judgmental, and cutting. "I don't understand why you're so close after all these years," they said. "It seems unnatural." I felt the tension rise in my chest, the familiar sting of others' judgments. But instead of responding with defensiveness or anger, I drew a deep breath. "We've spent years apart," I said calmly. "And now we're choosing to be present in each other's lives. It's not about what anyone else thinks. It's about understanding, forgiveness, and love." Her eyes softened, the sharpness in her gaze replaced by tentative respect. The room relaxed, the tension dissipating as others followed my lead. I realized then that public acknowledgement was not about appeasing everyone. It was about maintaining dignity, compassion, and clarity. Meanwhile, my daughter and I continued to rebuild our personal bond. We spent quiet mornings in the garden, hands buried in soil as we planted flowers for the upcoming season. We shared late-night conversations in the kitchen, sipping herbal tea and discussing dreams, fears, and future plans. It was during one of these evenings, with the sun setting in soft shades of pink and orange, that she opened up about the years she had felt lost. "I thought I would never find my place," she whispered. "I was scared that by coming back, I'd just make things worse." I held her hand, feeling the tremor in her voice. "Coming back wasn't wrong," I said gently. "It was brave. And you've made things better by being here, by facing everything with honesty." Her eyes softened with tears, and she leaned into me. "I'm glad," she said simply. "I'm glad we found each other." One of the most emotional days came when we decided to revisit the place where she had spent her early childhood, the house where I had raised her, now long since sold to new owners. The air smelled faintly of dust and wood polish, the kind of scent that carries echoes of memory. We walked through the rooms slowly, touching walls, tracing familiar contours, and recalling small moments of laughter, play, and love. "This is where it all began," I said softly. "And now it's also where we can remember what was lost and what we've regained." She nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. "I feel it too," she whispered. "The memories, they're still alive here." For hours we walked, talked, and remembered. And as we left, hand in hand, I felt a deep sense of closure, not only for the years we had lost, but for the future we were now shaping together. The public consequences of our story continued in quieter, less dramatic ways. Some extended family members who had been hesitant began to engage with us more openly. Friends offered support and encouragement. Even casual acquaintances, once unsure, approached with curiosity and empathy rather than judgment. We learned that transparency, patience, and kindness could transform skepticism into understanding. It wasn't about forcing acceptance, it was about consistently demonstrating the depth of our bond, the sincerity of our intentions, and the integrity with which we navigated life together. And yet, the healing wasn't only about others. The most significant transformation occurred within ourselves. My daughter and I discovered that forgiveness is not a single act, but a continuous process, a choice made daily to embrace love, empathy, and understanding over resentment and regret. I found myself reflecting on my own journey, on the quiet strength that had carried me through decades of longing and grief. I realized that healing required courage, not just from her, but from me as well. Courage to face the past, to confront mistakes, to embrace uncertainty, and to trust that love could endure despite the years of absence. The seasons shifted, and with them, our family life began to feel more settled. Autumn brought crisp air and the scent of fallen leaves. We spent hours raking the yard together, laughing as the wind carried the leaves into swirling patterns. In those small, ordinary moments, I realized that the extraordinary journey we had been on, one of loss, revelation, and reconciliation, was slowly transforming into a life filled with everyday joys. It was during one of these afternoons that I noticed a subtle change in her. She moved with more ease, laughed more freely, and seemed lighter, as though the weight of past fears had finally begun to lift. The same went for me. I felt my heart uncoil from the years of tension and longing, replaced by a gentle sense of peace I had thought I'd lost forever. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, she and I sat on the porch with mugs of steaming tea. The smell of the chamomile and cinnamon wrapped around us like a comforting blanket. "Mom," she began softly, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about the years we missed, about how complicated life can be." I nodded, feeling the ache of those lost years anew. "Yes," I said, my voice catching. "Complicated and messy, but we're here now, and that's what matters." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. She said, "I feel like I finally understand who I am, and I feel like I finally have a home again, with you, with Michael, with everyone." Tears pricked my eyes. "You always had a place," I whispered. "Even when life separated us, you were never truly lost to me. And now, we can build what we should have had all along." The next test of our healing came with a family gathering that included relatives from out of state. Some of them had heard only fragments of our story. Others had been present during the wedding, but all approached with a mixture of curiosity and caution. I watched as she navigated the room, gracefully fielding questions, sharing stories, and radiating the confidence that had begun to bloom within her. At one point, a cousin pulled me aside. "I have to admit," they said, "I wasn't sure about all this at first, but seeing the two of you together, I can see that it's genuine. I'm proud of you both." Her hand found mine under the table, a silent squeeze of solidarity. I nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. The road to acceptance, both within ourselves and in the eyes of others, had been long, but it was working. At home, the quiet evenings became our sanctuary. We established routines that felt grounding: shared meals, evening walks, gardening, and the simple act of being present with one another. We talked about the future, vacations we might take together, milestones we wanted to celebrate, and the small, meaningful rituals that would define our family life going forward. One night, she confided in me about her fears regarding our son Michael. She said, I worry he might feel like he's in the middle, she said softly. I reached out, placing my hand over hers. I reassured her. He loves both of us, and we're learning to navigate this together. It won't always be easy, but love, true love, doesn't shy away from challenges. It embraces them. Her hand glistened in the warm lamplight. She said, "You're right, and I trust that now we can face anything together." The most significant breakthrough came unexpectedly, in a simple act of trust. She invited me to participate in a charity event she had been organizing, a small community project to support children in foster care. As we worked side by side, painting, organizing, and interacting with the children, I realized that our bond had become more than just familial. It was active, living, and meaningful. "I see you here," she said quietly, "helping, caring, giving. I feel proud to be your daughter." I felt tears sting my eyes. "And I'm proud of you, for the woman you've become, for the courage you've shown, for trusting me enough to let me back into your life." As the weeks passed, we continued to solidify our connection. Our conversations grew deeper, touching on memories of the past, hopes for the future, and reflections on the lessons we had learned. The hurt and confusion that had defined the early stages of our reunion had softened into understanding, compassion, and mutual respect. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, she paused and said, "I think I finally understand what forgiveness really means. It's not about forgetting or pretending the past didn't hurt. It's about choosing to move forward together with love." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride and relief. "Exactly," I said. "And it's a choice we make every day, in small ways and large." The public ripple effects of our story continued to ease over time. Some relatives who had been hesitant began to engage more openly. Neighbors approached with curiosity and warmth, and even casual acquaintances who had once questioned our bond began to see the authenticity in our relationship. Through it all, we maintained honesty and dignity, never letting outside opinions dictate the terms of our family life. Our priority remained clear: nurturing the bond that had been lost and carefully rebuilding trust, love, and understanding. The final turning point came during a quiet afternoon in the garden. We were planting new flowers for the upcoming season, the air rich with the scent of fresh earth and budding blooms. She paused, kneeling beside me, her hands in the soil. "Mom," she said softly, "I feel like we've truly found our way, not just as mother and daughter, but as a family. And I feel happy, whole." I looked at her, my heart full. "Me too," I whispered. And that's all I could ever hope for, that we could find each other again and choose to stay together no matter the past. We embraced, the warmth of our bond radiating in the late afternoon sun. In that moment, the years of separation, confusion, and sorrow melted into something enduring, something alive, and something beautiful. As I sit here now, in the quiet of the evening, I can feel the weight of the years we lost. And yet, I also feel the warmth of what we've reclaimed. The house is calm, the smell of the night air drifting through the open windows, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and freshly mown grass. I think about the twists of fate, the decisions, the moments of fear and hope that brought us here. Life has a way of placing us in impossible situations, testing us in ways we never expected. Losing my daughter felt like losing a part of myself, a hole in my heart that I thought would never be filled. And yet, here she is, not just as my daughter, but as my friend, my confidant, my family. We've rebuilt a bond that many might have thought irreparable, proving that love, patience, and courage can bridge even the deepest divides. I often think about the moral lessons hidden in our story. Life is rarely fair. People make mistakes, circumstances pull us apart, and the years can stretch into decades before reconciliation becomes possible. But the power of forgiveness, the courage to reconnect, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty are transformative. They allow us to heal wounds we once thought permanent, to find joy in places we once thought empty, and to discover that family is not just what you are born into, but what you choose to nurture and protect. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the pain of the past felt too heavy, when the complexity of our situation seemed impossible to navigate. But every small act of kindness, every shared smile, every gentle conversation became a stepping stone toward healing. And now, as I watch my daughter and Michael build their life together, I see the ripple effects of love and understanding spreading outward, touching neighbors, relatives, and even strangers who hear our story. I want to ask you, dear listener, have you ever had a relationship that felt lost, beyond repair, or impossible to fix? Did you find the courage to reach out, to forgive, to rebuild, or to let go? Sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most profound joy. And sometimes what feels like an ending is simply the start of a new beginning. We have learned that reconciliation isn't a single moment. It's a process, a daily choice to love, to trust, and to honor the bonds that matter most. Our story is far from perfect, but it is real, honest, and human. It is proof that even in the face of betrayal, absence, or secrets, the heart has an incredible capacity for forgiveness, healing, and growth. As I close this story, I leave you with a gentle reflection. Cherish the people in your life, even if circumstances keep you apart. Seek understanding, extend grace, and never underestimate the power of a second chance. The relationships that matter most are worth the effort, the patience, and sometimes the courage to face decades of lost time. And finally, if you have a story of loss, reconciliation, or hidden truths that has shaped your life, I encourage you to share it in the comments. You never know who might find hope, inspiration, or comfort in your words. Thank you for listening, for being present with me, and for walking this journey of heartbreak, revelation, and healing. Would you have had the courage to reconnect if you were in my place? Tell me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and support the channel for more real-life tales that explore the complexity of family, love, and forgiveness. Remember, even in the most difficult moments, there is hope, there is growth, and there is always the chance to rebuild what was lost.